a la deriva, perderse.
But even if you're reading a science paper or a work of philosophy, you have to give yourself up to the thought of the other.
El escritor lo es siempre de la literatura que falta.
Entonces ahora vamos a trabajar. ¿Me quieren hacer alguna pregunta?
Tenéis un minuto para dibujar.
A mí me encanta que los libros empiecen justo desde la portada.
But what is the function of a novelist? I mean, maybe you can tell me.
No, I have no idea.
Hay una cuestión geográfica en la circulación de la literatura, una cuestión de mapas y fronteras.
Un monólogo interior no es sencillo de hacer una película.
It has to do with the feeling that it's truthful enough to my own experience.
So clearly, it can be taught.
Hola, bienvenidos y bienvenidas a esta nueva actividad del Filba 2021. Hoy vamos a escuchar a la escritora canadiense Rachel Cusk. Cusk nació en Toronto y se mudó a Reino Unido a los 7 años. Es la autora de la trilogía Contraluz, Tránsito y Prestigio, del libro de memorias Despojos y de varias obras de ficción y no ficción. Ha recibido la beca Guggenheim y su última novela, Segunda Casa, saldrá en enero de 2022 en Argentina, editada por Libros del Asteroide. Agradecemos a la Embajada de Canadá en Argentina y a la Cátedra Abierta en homenaje a Roberto Bolaño, Universidad Diego Portales, por acompañarnos en esta actividad. El diálogo está a cargo de María Sonia Cristoff, que es autora de Falsa Calma, Desubicados, Bajo Influencia, Inclúyame Afuera y Mal de Época. Tuvimos el placer de contar con sus clases hace unos meses en el laboratorio de escritura Filba en un curso de autoficción. Esta actividad, como todas las actividades del festival, es gratuita, pero si quieren colaborar con el festival pueden encontrar los links de donación acá abajo en la descripción del video. Esperamos que disfruten de la charla y los invitamos, como siempre, a seguir el resto de las actividades que duran hasta el domingo desde nuestro sitio web filba.org.ar. Muchas gracias.
Well, hello. So, hi, I think we are starting now. Rachel, how are you?
There, I can see you.
Okay, good. Okay, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm sort of a little dazed sometimes by these long distance, these sort of time and space travel experiences of appearing in a country without being in a country. I've done a couple of these in Australia, and I mean all these places that I've never been, and so yeah, it's more than just a phone call, if you see what I mean.
Yes. Like we are missing something, no?
Yes. Yeah.
Although your view on festivals doesn't seem to be very, like something that you miss by reading Prestige, I would say, but there are some good things that one misses. Yes,
yeah,
you're right.
There are some very good things. Well, they're ripe for satire. That's probably the best way of putting it. But that doesn't mean I don't enjoy them. They're just easy to satirize.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, well, I was planning to talk mainly about your work because you have quite a number of writers here in Argentina, and as they are all, which is very strange, they are all translated by the same publishers, that is Libros del Asteroide in Spanish, and I like to say that it's a very, very good trouble that the translations make, because sometimes there's like big tensions appear when traveling, from one variation of Spanish to the other. Sometimes, yes. I mean, we cannot just bear translations made in Spain, to put it frankly and easily. But your books, luckily for you and for your readers, are they have very, very, I mean, these translations travel very well. So that's good and not so common. So the first thing I was thinking I'd like to hear from you is about your relationship with translations. I mean, if you take part in them, or you just let them happen.
I mean, it's something I've written about a bit, the translator as a figure in culture, and as a almost like a prosthetic limb or a replacement heart, you know, this completely essential organic being that has to be part of the writing process. So I engage with translators a lot. When they want to engage, I do, and I am friends with some of my translators,
good.
because it seems to me that particularly when, I mean, my work at this point in my life is very, very specific, and I know what it is I'm doing and saying to a very extreme degree. So that process of I suppose negotiation, of trying to transfer this through someone else into another language is very intricate and interesting. So at the moment, I've just moved to Paris, and my French is very far from perfect. It's possibly even very far from good. So I'm really, really experiencing the difficulty of translating myself into this new
completely
world.
or working with a translator.
Yeah. So the incredible sort of intergalactic travel of the translator allows a text is incredible to me.
Yeah, but now you're translating some novel, for the latest, for instance, or you're translating some specific work, or I am misunderstood?
No, I'm not translating. I'm having to translate myself.
Or yourself,
into
which is another. Yeah, I know. I thought, as you mentioned Beckett so much, I thought that you were doing like some kind of this bilingual.
But it's interesting because one of the things that I've felt in starting to exist in a very rudimentary way in a new language, you know, I felt a great sense of being tired of my language, tired of English, and of having almost come to the end of what I felt it was possible for me to say in English. And so it's almost like being reincarnated. And I've been reincarnated as I think a 3-year-old French child.
Yeah,
that's about my level. So it's amazing to be making these new sounds and new sentences, and that feels like an opportunity for self-reinvention in some way.
Interesting and very bold. And it strikes me as something that like drives your work, at least. This fact that you are always looking for something different, and which gives your narrative and your whole project like very experimental bias, I would say, or bet. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I find it so interesting. Like, and in your latest novel, In Second Place, that will be published in Argentina next year, there is a phrase that I thought I could sometimes you have to wait for my English to come, you know, because I'm not 3 years old, but more or less. So it's not that it synthesizes your quest, or I mean your work's quest. And it's a moment where the narrator says that she has like a dog-like quality of always being digging in until like some kind of truth or painful light comes to light. And I was thinking of this phrase and looking, like, you know, with some distance to at least to the books that you have published in Spanish. And where I could see for the audience's sake, I could add that in your trilogy that is comprised of Outline and Transit and Kudos, and then a previous book called Aftermath in English. You're always like digging into something very specific, like going to the core of things. Like I would say that in your trilogy, you go to the core of what it means to narrate at the beginning of the 21st century. And well, an Aftermath is more evident because it's even in the subtitle, which is it's an indagation on marriage and divorce. And in your latest novel, I would say that you do the same with what it means to be to be an artist. So I was thinking, and now you say that you are like somehow digging into what it means to write and be and exist in another language, which also like gives more emphasis to the hypothesis. So I was wondering if this is like a method for you, like a composition method, that you first think of a subject or one of those things that you want to dig it into, and then you advance, or how if this what I mean about your composition method of your books. If you first think of a problem, like a literary problem or a subject, and from there you go, and how is it that you work normally?
Well, I think my writing process and my process of composing and conceiving of things is very unconscious, very non-egotistical in a funny way. It's not anything to do with identity or with myself saying things. It's a search for authenticity, I suppose, and it's driven by a awareness of the process by which things become from one minute to the next almost inauthentic. And I think I see what I do as a correction. it's a if you think about how change happens, how progress occurs, if it is progress, how development and movements through time occur. And I suppose I see that as a kind of zigzag path around the truth, that things are brought back to the truth and veer away from it again. And I guess my impulse is to see, I suppose, reality, or the version of events that people take to be reality, to catch it in that drifting away from truth, and to ask myself why that is, what the difference is between these two things, and to try to kind of correct it in some way. And it just so happens that in female identity, for instance, in femininity and domesticity, and a lot of other parts of life that I've been given to write about, that creeping in of artificiality, of inauthenticity is a constant hazard, and so I guess it's given me a lot of work to do,
trying to destroy common sense, something like this. I wonder what you mean by the truth, because I see that you are very that you read a lot of philosophy and psychoanalysis, at least Freud. But so what do you mean by the truth? When you say that you are searching after this truth?
Well, I mean, the truth is an annoying word.
Yeah, it's very risky.
Whatever the opposite of fake is, whatever the opposite of inauthentic.
Yeah.
So
yes. So don't you think that fake is made mainly of common sense?
What, that fakeness is the same as common sense? No.
Yeah. That as if you were like trying to go after the truth, you go against common sense, because they have this like this shattering of things as they are in your work. This is what I see. Like you shatter the structures. Like this is why I find it so very really experimental and bold.
I suppose I believe that at heart, the person other than me, the reader, the other, recognizes as a private, almost spiritual fact, some nature of things inside their appearance, and some dissonance between private knowledge, personal knowledge, perceptual knowledge, and narrative, and what is said, what is agreed on, and that actually there's a different kind of agreement that, that it's from me to him or her or it to the other being, that asserts a different reality. Okay, we won't call it truth, but a different reality, or a more specific, morally resolved reality. And
when you sorry, yeah.
Well, I mean, just to say that the presence of an effect of narrative, you know, not just in literature, but in our lives, in how that idea of a story is wound into our lives and actions, and even our experience of time, our feelings about the future and the past, and it's really I guess a conversation, possibly even a sort of jousting with that concept of narrative, and that as I say, I think, you know, I wouldn't write what I write if I thought I was the only person who if I just thought I was clever and could you know, sort of, it's only my supposition that this is a form of communication, that this is a communicative event in which, for whatever reason, I've made a discovery and I can communicate it to somebody who you know, likewise will say, oh, in fact, that's what I also perceive, but I've not allowed myself to perceive it. And you know, I think that's a common ambition for any writer, probably.
Yeah. And I find, as I said, like before, your, I mean, hypothesis, I would say, on the trilogy about the novel, or about the form, yes, about the novel at the beginning of this century is extremely interesting. So I was thinking if, I mean, of course, it's related to some of the statements that I read on your interviews, like the character is dead at the beginning of the 21st century. That's what I say. The character is dead. The plot doesn't make any sense. And it's extremely interesting the way you give an answer to that in your trilogy. So what can you say about that, about this project, about this because these statements in your book? Yeah.
I mean, there's still a lot of I read so often that you know, when a writer makes a statement about why in this moment in history, in the world as it is right now, why they write, or why, you know, they often say we need stories, we need, you know, And I completely disagree. I definitely don't think we need stories. I think we need the opposite of stories.
Well, what would that be?
Well, I mean, I guess it's sort of, as I was just saying, that this corrective, we don't need stories, we need reality. We need to know what reality actually is, and to be able to agree, even if in the most fleeting, insubstantial way, to at least recognize mutually the same thing. And to me, any art, that's all it's trying to do. It's trying to create an area of agreement around reality. So yeah, I mean, for me, stories are narrative is an increasingly sort of bloated, sort of fantasizing form that really has at this point a proven sort of ill effect on I think the mental health of culture and people's mental health and their ability to cope with the life they've actually been given. So stories, yeah, I don't have very much need for them myself.
No, yeah, it sometimes happens when you're in the middle of no, what I thought as a reader, I mean, reading your trilogy, which I love, is that that is true what you say. I mean, I found that what you said in interviews, sometimes, people, what writers say in interviews or even in their essays do not go or isn't seen in the work itself. But I found that in your case, it doesn't happen, because it's in the trilogy, it's extremely interesting to see how these three books, let's not say how the trilogy like fights against, I wouldn't say narrative, I would say that it fights to destroy and to show that the traditional novel has nothing to say anymore. But at the same time, I felt like some lure. I don't know if lure is the word, like the lure of narration, like the narration before the novel, I would say, like to say it in Benjamin's terms, like, or maybe the narrative that that you start hearing those stories when you wait at the doctors or at the hairdressers, it's like this likeness, that's this human likeness for stories and for small stories. I mean,
and that's where I wanted to put the whole idea of stories and narrative. I took the Odyssey as my starting point, and wanted very much to return the concept of narrative, which is a really useful and beautiful concept in lots of ways, as long as it doesn't become a way of seeing the world. It becomes a way of, it is a form of self-expression. It's a way of the individual talking to the group, talking to the community, or it's an entertainment that's also, and it's completely susceptible to exaggeration and to a bit of changing of the facts, but that's a very dangerous thing when it becomes a ruling principle. And so for me, the joy of the trilogy was to put that native impulse back into people's mouths and it's people doing what they have always done, which is saying what happened to them and trying to make it a bit more entertaining for the person listening to them. And that is the beginning and end of it.
Yeah, and you made it very well. Yeah, very well. Now you mentioned Homer, and in your, I don't remember where now, I think that in one of your nonfiction works, you mentioned Sophocles and Aeschylus. I don't know how you say Aeschylus in English. Aeschylus, I think.
Aeschylus, yeah.
Aeschylus. And then in a life's work where you deal with maternity, you also make a lot of quotations but on more contemporary writers like Robert, I don't know, Proust, Edith Wharton, and some others. So I was thinking how these two, like, how would you say, series of readings operate in your work, in your mind when you're working. Like, I mean, something that has more to do with the 19th century, like the golden era moment of the novel, and those classic ones, because I see a conversation with just these two series in your work, but I wanted you to tell us more on that, about that.
Well, I mean, I guess I would always want to place myself in a tradition. I think that, I think my work is not misunderstood, but strangely understood sometimes as being autofiction or really autobiographical, or whereas I see myself as quite a classical writer, and yes, standing very much in a tradition, and with having been nourished by literature all my life, and in conversation with it through my work to an extent. I don't just like do things in a vacuum, and my new book, Second Place, continues that. It's very much a conversation with another book, and I think what's interesting for me is that as I've got further away into my own concepts, I guess it's like someone growing up and leaving home. that I've sort of left my literary home, more or less, and the texts and the writers that I used, that I lived with and used to help me and learn from, seem quite far away from me now, and I find that I'm in a place where there isn't so much of a language. Not so much has been built. In fact, nothing has been built particularly. Mm-hmm. Not a lot has been built in this place that I'm in. So that's a kind of interesting. There's very little that I can read at the moment that teaches me anything. I'm finding I'm being taught much more by art, visual art, and music.
Yeah, that's what well, in your last novel, one can guess something of this. I know you're constantly making this comparison between writers and visual arts, and also, well, like the narrator has this kind of revelation through a work of art. I mean, like it becomes her obsession because it tells her something that she doesn't quite completely get, but at the same time drives her, which I thought that was a very good way of speaking, of telling what it is to be interested in your own writing. So what I mean, in this, so could we say that with this, like, how would you say, like going to a third language? No, it's your second language. Maybe it's your third country, but it's your second language. Like us quoting you, like a 3-year-old. Yes, and fed up with the past. Would you say that maybe now, like your interlocutors? Do you say that? That? Oh, okay. Would be more in the visual, or and if it is so, what kind of, I mean, visual arts, or just the visual, the landscape, the city, the what?
I think it's more that I've had a series of huge revelations about language in its relationship to identity, particularly to femininity, to social class, especially in England. I suppose what I have come to feel is that the whole medium that I work in is saturated with patriarchy and male ways of looking at the world, and not just male, you know, capitalistic maybe, and bourgeois, and I don't think, because language is such a common currency, it's such a democratic medium in a way, and perhaps the majority of people don't ever consider the extent to which they are formed by the language that they've been given to speak, and the things that are available to say are predestining, as it were, what is in fact said and how you become, and that whole process is kind of interesting, but it's also, in the end, at my point in life and with what I do, it feels almost as though one, you know, it feels almost like a fight to the death, you know. How can you make this medium, this thing, do something different? How will it ever be able to do anything truly different? Because, you know, as we easily see from literary history, that experimentation and radicalism and are not, they don't affect change. You know, Joyce wrote Ulysses 100 years ago, and the novel is still as conventional now as it was then. You know, people are still writing quasi-Victorian narratives about love,
incredible,
and describing rooms and doing whatever they're doing, and so in the visual arts, a change is an advance of the group. If new ground is broken, everybody moves into it, and you know, that is progress. Something is actually being. Whereas literature, that's not true. Literature stays exactly where it is, and yeah, occasionally a person does something different. But that's just a little.
But I think it's. But don't you? I mean, I agree with you. We have these incredible people writing as if we were in 19th century, with all the structures and unshaken, you know, because it's not only the book and the narrative form, of course, but don't you think that at the same time, at least here in Latin America or in Argentina, we have very like a strong movement of many writers trying different things. What's your, how do you see that in your surroundings?
I mean, I think people certainly will try different things, and there are people in you know, Anglophone culture also trying different things, but they don't change anything.
Yes, no. Well,
know,
literature,
if Joyce didn't change anything, no one's going to change anything, and you know, those are experiments, they're exceptions, and they're also not.
You may change anything in the world, not only in literature.
Change anything in literary culture. It you know, they just exist alongside, and it becomes a sort of consumer choice whether you want to read something more interesting or not. So that, you know, that's just something about the language economy, and also what a book is. A book is a pretty democratic thing. Not everybody can buy a painting or you know. But you know, you can buy or borrow a book, and it operates very differently. And I guess I've come to feel that there's a intransigence, something in literary expression that can't be broken down. It can maybe be broken down in poetry, but it can't be broken down in prose, and that is a or not in English prose. So that's
so you think that sorry, but you think that through visual arts something you have the hope that something can be broken or changed?
Well, I think you're free. And I mean, it's I think of these things only not because I think, oh, I wish I was an artist, or only because it reflects so much back on what is problematic about language. And it's really that's what when I think about abstraction, how hard it is to arrive at abstraction in language. And okay, Beckett, who you mentioned at the beginning, you know, he got maybe closer than most people to that. And that, in a sense, is where one would want to go towards abstraction. But to get a reader to participate in that is a very different thing in language than in the visual art.
Very. Because sorry.
Yeah, because a book can only exist when someone reads it. So the reader needs to create the book, and you can't ask them to create something that, you know, is beyond comprehension. Anyway, so these are all interesting ideas to me.
When you mentioned many times your quest when you were writing something that is called, I've seen sometimes that your work is labeled as autofiction when they speak of the trilogy, which I don't know how, because I can't find anything to relate it to autofiction, but it could be easier to understand, at least as a reader, when in Aftermath or a life's work. And there's a very, in Transit, there's a very funny passage where there is there are two writers at a festival, at a literary festival, and the narrator is there too, and they are all together around the subject of autofiction. Although these two guys have, of course I'm telling this for the audience, Rachel, I know you know, but sometimes we don't know about what we write, but I mean, just for them to open some spaces in your book. This is a nice passage because it's full of humor. I love your very, very subtle sense of humor. And these two guys are speaking or are labeled as autofiction writers, although they write very different stuff. One of them has written a very strange, let's say, or not common life story, and the other one has dedicated like a 1,000-page volume to take notes of his everyday trifle, no? Just what he eats or whatever. And so it seems like one of those very metafictional passages in your books that they are full of them. And if this is the case, I would like you to tell us a bit more about that, and also how it relates to your very interesting, I don't know if statement or hypothesis on autofiction, when you've said, at least in some interviews, that you turned to autofiction because you felt that novel wasn't a form proper to tell a female experience anymore.
Well, I think what I said was that earlier in my career, I turned to the memoir form to write about motherhood, or that was before there was this word autofiction. For me, it was a much more straightforward concept of memoir writing, where you use the I and you say, oh, this happened to me. But I think since then, what writers like Sheila Heti have done with autofiction is much more daring and interesting. And that wasn't really, I wasn't trying to necessarily play with that form. I just wanted to find a form that supposedly represented my personal experience, whether or not that was my personal experience.
So you didn't want ambiguity on that side. Is that what you mean? You didn't want the autofiction's ambiguity. That's what you mean?
That's right. That's right. Because to me, talking about these aspects of female experience was it needed to circumvent or dodge the automatic reaction in the female reader, or the male reader indeed, to say that's nothing to do with me. I don't feel like that. But in fact, it didn't really work, because the fact that I owned those experiences by saying I meant that the reader could just go, oh, she feels like that. I don't feel like that. You know, I love my baby. I love and adore motherhood, and I'm completely fulfilled by it. And she feels, you know, so that, yeah, that was an experiment that in the end led me to work out how to write the trilogy, to take myself completely out of it, or myself, not that I only ever used myself as an example of something. And, you know, I don't care when people talk about the trilogy as autofiction or autobiographical and say you to me rather than Faye, the character. I don't really mind, because I think, well, part of, in the end, what I've done is be very clear about what the basis for my writing is, where my material comes from, and I don't mind. I mean, you know, you build a book out of material, and best if that material is very close to you and stuff you know well, you know, the stuff that you can verify. That's, you know, it doesn't matter like who I am or what I particularly do or don't do, or it's just, you know, what I can do with this material that happens to be mine. I'm you know, I'm a white middle-class middle-aged woman. I'm not a lot of other people, but so you know, the material I have reflects that, and to then say that that's autofiction seems completely ridiculous. You know, the fact that because I don't write about, you know, people completely different from me on the other side of the world doing things that I know nothing about, because I don't use my imagination supposedly, that what I'm writing is autofiction. It isn't. It's, as I say, I'm pretty classical, probably quite conventional in a way.
I wouldn't say you're classical, sorry, but
my attitude, I guess, to form is very, very classical. So
maybe your readings,
the things that I'm trying to do with it. But I would say the same is true of, you know, Beckett, certainly, and lots of other people I admire, who, you know, do new and radical things, are still essentially.
Maybe they are classical as readers or as a hope, but I see also in Beckett, as in your writing, like this, this digging, this stirring quality that I was telling you at the beginning. So, well, okay, but we don't have to agree on every level. And now you mentioned imagination, and that's also very interesting what you do towards imagination in your books. I would like again to tell something about some passage of one of your books. This is the outline, the first one of the outline trilogy, where the narrator Faye goes to Greece to teach a summer course. She gives the attendants, or the students, let's say, an assignment that is they have to tell what is it that they saw while going to the place, in the walking around or whatever. So they all do the assignment except one that is very angry because she accuses the narrator of being a very bad teacher, because she always thought that writing was a thing related to imagination, and they were not using imagination at all. And I think that the whole trilogy is also like a a fight against the so much boasted power of imagination, like originality, you know, that you also like go against in your latest novel with this conversation with the book. But I don't want to. We can go back to that later. So what's the play of imagination, of the non-play, or the play of non-imagination in your book?
Well, I think that's a completely ridiculous kind of amateur definition of imagination, that imagination is making things up that have absolutely nothing to do with anything that you know or with your own life, or you know, I use imagination every single second of my writing process. You know, that, you know, I'm creating something, and that requires imagination. It requires being able to conceive of and create something, and that is imagination. That isn't the kind of imagination that this character in the book is talking about is much closer to pornography. It's much closer to a sort of slightly sordid fantasy, and that you're enacting in your own head, and I guess I think a lot of writing happens in the middle, in between those two things, where there's this kind of cultural rule that especially in England, that your book you should be able to completely prove that your book is not about yourself, okay, and that you've written about something, as though it's really impolite to use any of your lived or human experience. So there's a great denial.
Is it a rule in the Anglo-Saxon world?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
But mainly among male writers, maybe.
Oh no, I'd say both, but
both.
Being able to say that you researched, you did research and you made up things, and is definitely has higher status than.
So this is valued, is overvalued, is valued.
Yes, very much so. And you know, how can that be a surprise? Because essentially you go further down that road and you get to Hollywood, you get to movies, you get to, you know, people sitting in cinemas having, you know, extraordinary out-of-body experiences, you know, losing themselves in a world that's nothing to do with them. And anyway, so I think our whole concept of imagination has been pretty much pulled apart and misunderstood.
Yeah, and well, I was mentioning also something that happens that like another, let's say, operation or narrative operation that you make in your latest novel, that is called Second Place, and it's narrated by a writer again called M, like in the Kafkian way, with just the first letter. Characters are, most of characters, no, not most, but the two main characters have just capital letters as names, and she lives in somewhere in Europe, one supposes, where with her husband, and they have this second place that is a second house where they invite, or she invites some artists, because she needs to have this kind of intellectual conversation or vital conversation, shared experience, because her husband, thanks to her happiness, belongs to some kind of other world where he connects with nature mostly. And at the end of the book, now we can say you say, or you wrote a note saying that Second Place was written in conversation, as you say now, with a woman called Mabel. Let me check a second.
Dodgley-Han, I can tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Mabel Dodgley-Han.
No, she's not. She's not known around here at all. She used to be a patron of the arts, wasn't she?
Yes. So she, in a sense, sort of founded, not officially, but the whole idea of an artist colony at Taos in New Mexico. So that was her vision, to invite writers and artists to that landscape that she believed was a very suggestive and spiritual landscape. And
I was, and she invited D.H. Lawrence, apparently, because she wrote the book on that. And this is the book that Second Place is conversating with. And I thought that this maybe was also one of your projects, bets against imagination, or the usual, the common, what the common sense understands by imagination. No? Like, well, okay, now I don't need to connect with the stars. I just need a book to speak to talk to.
Well, so I mean, for me, it was completely the opposite. It was a great leap of imagination to I mean, that really was the greatest imaginative leap I've made, to assume something of the identity of this woman, whose voice struck me as a very powerful, interesting, and wounded and battered antecedent, an ancestor, an ancestor in the female voice, and her capacity to provoke the scorn of other people, not just in what she tells about, but in, you know, the actual artifact of her writing and her whole existence, seemed to me at this distance from her life to have become a power. And that was what I wanted to access, was that power.
I didn't follow, and I'm very interested.
The fact that she was scorned, her writing was scorned. I mean, she had money, so she could kind of do what she wanted, but her voice has been belittled and scorned, and she's been dead for 80 years or something. And it seems to me that across that distance, that particular distance of time, that her this scornedness has become power, which I think is what happens to women and martyrs. She was a martyr to the cause, actually, of women telling the truth, and so I was very, very interested in resurrecting her, and using the space that she created, which is really what I'm doing. I'm using the space. I'm not writing about her or as her.
No,
I'm using the very, very particular mold that she made in life, and because I found so much in it that was pertinent and true, and to have, you know, one is looking for female shapes, you know, and not finding them, authentic female shapes in culture, and you know, I when I found her book, I believed I found that shape, and so yeah, so and that was a great leap of imagination to do that.
Okay, well, okay, yes, because you stick to your own version of imagination. I'm trying to, okay, it's good, it's good. This is how things change. You start making another connotations for the same word, but I'm still remembering what everybody understands by certain words and concepts. So in what way do you think that that M connects to her writing, to what you saw, to what you found in this book?
I don't understand the question. M is the character in the book.
Yes.
Who yes, I suppose is writing the book, because she's writing it in the first person. So, but I
So
don't quite understand.
No. The question is, how do you think that reading this book, or what you found in the power that you found in this woman's Lujan's, what was that?
Mabel
Dodge
Dodge
Lujan, work. How did it inform or converse with, or how did it affect the creation of the character, the main character in your book, because she's the one speaking all the time?
Well, I used her elements of her style, and I guess elements of her view of life and her predicament, which seemed to me to be still open, not resolved, and the things that she had, the questions she had asked, the things that still didn't seem to have an answer to me. And so I was interested in using some of those same structures, and I definitely used the dramatic structure of the book, but I did a lot of I guess I used the material. I took the material and I sort of cut it up and rearranged it and did all sorts of other things with it. But the basic predicament was my was my foundational material in writing that book.
Yeah, we should be rounding up, but just one more question on that novel. So how do you think that this conversation between M and Dodge Lujan is how do you say, conversating? Sorry about that word. I guess that it doesn't exist in English, but you understand. With women's experience nowadays.
Well, I mean, what she's saying is that in the end, her will, her ability to make things happen by sheer force of will is the closest she can get to power, but it's the opposite of power. It's a forcing, it's a exhausting oneself in the attempt to make something happen, and that's really the kind of central point that I saw in it. This mockery of her as a woman who uses her will as a strong-willed, and yet there's nothing else is given to a woman. There's no birthright that will result in her having any power in the world at all. And so that was, I guess, the thing that I saw that I thought, okay, that is not true. That is still true to an extent.
Mm-hmm. Like a feminine version of power, that it should go that way.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I mean, I think that we only have 5 minutes left. So there are certain moral things, but I prefer to ask you if you want to say something, ask something, or add something.
That's not a good question to
Okay. No. Okay, it happens. No, I just wanted to.
Since I'm very shy, but no, I mean, I wish that your festival had been an in-person experience. This separation is a strange thing. I wonder what it will lead to. Human beings not being together in the way that they were.
Yeah, well, maybe next year with your novel, your new novel on the streets, you might manage to travel in person.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's yeah.
Sorry, I know this shouldn't be in the end, but I'm really very curious about two recurrences in all the books that I've read, all the books of you that I've read. And we'll finish with that because it's just a matter of curiosity, and probably they will edit it in the end, and they will end up with the saying goodbye. But I found that you mentioned very, very much birds, like birds appear all the time. Sometimes they appear as the animals, but other times there are lots of comparisons with birds, the sound of voices and the faces, and also the swimming, the act of swimming. And as these are, I don't know, two so interesting things, I just wanted to
It's
ask
funny,
you.
the usual thing that people notice is that I always have dogs in my books. And it's true that pretty much every single book I've written has a dog in it. Birds, I hadn't noticed. Yeah, and swimming is an important symbolic activity occasionally, I guess, that I find the symbolism of it appealing in certain moments. But it's usually, I suppose, an image of transcendence of some kind, which is where I think I've used it in the past.
And also in your life, besides your book, do you swim? You're a good swimmer?
I swim a lot, yeah. I'm a big swimmer.
Okay. That must be very related to
yes, I guess that's
to
why
write.
it's there.
Yeah, you've read Al Alvarez, I guess, on swimming.
I have not.
Swimming.
I will go and read that immediately.
Because he's British.
Yes, I know. No, I've read lots of other books, but I haven't read him on swimming.
Okay, he has this.
Oh, that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, you may love it. Okay. Well, Rachel. Okay, so we cannot go for drinks now, as I would like to, but yeah. Okay, maybe some other time.
Another time. I'll get there one day. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you. Okay. Well, see you.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Bye.